Well, it was an attack in Sydney's heartland that was so random and pointless, it scared us and it broke our hearts. Curtis Chang, a 58-year-old loving father of two, leaving work, murdered, shot at point-blank range. The horrific crime was made more shocking when we discovered the killer was a 15-year-old, Fahad Jabbar, 15 years of age. So how does a teenager become a terrorist and how do we prevent another attack? Joining our panellists for this week's Big Issue is counter-terrorism expert Dr Anne Ali. Please welcome Anne. However, before we get to Anne, Mark Latham, you're first up. How do we stop this? Where is the problem?
Well, Carl, it's a problem that's been a long time coming. It started in the 1980s with family reunion or unskilled Muslim migration to Western Sydney. Whole or large parts of suburbs have got welfare dependency problems. And it pains me to say, in Western Sydney there is a Muslim problem. After Man Monis, who came from Western Sydney after the shooting last week, we have to recognise this is not just radical Islamic ideology, it's also people with too much time on their hands, too many opportunities to sit around in groups bitching about Western culture, bitching about the American president, bitching about the Australian Prime Minister, and getting up to no good. So the best thing the federal government can do is get these people out to work, break down the welfare dependency in Western Sydney. And in many ways, it's not just a question of stopping radicalisation, it's how do we promote normality, normalisation in Western Sydney so people are making a positive contribution to society.
And you're a counter-terrorism expert. Now, what do you think of what Mark just said then?
Well, what I've just heard from Mark is a range of very simplistic strings of answers that are always rolled out every time something like this happens without any understanding of the complexity of the situation.
Well, you can say that coming from Perth.
And with all due respect, do you work with these young people? I work with the young people who have been radicalised or are becoming radicalised in Perth and in Sydney and in Sydney and in Sydney. It is not a socio-economic problem. You have young people who are becoming radicalised from all stratas of society. It is not a socio-economic problem. It is not a problem that is a Muslim problem of Western Sydney. It is not a Muslim Western Sydney problem. It is a social problem that is embedded in a range of social issues. And what we're seeing now is not what we saw 10 years ago. It's a rapidly changing environment. It's a rapidly trending and transforming environment. And we cannot continue to rely on those one-liners that we were using 10 years ago to explain things 10 years ago. We need to take a much more comprehensive look at what's happening here and not fall back on these simplistic one-liners.
They're not stereotypes, it's reality. And if you talk to the federal police and the spy agencies, most of their activity is taken up listening in and trying to infiltrate these groups. They've got too much time on their hands, up to no good, driven by the radical ideology.
Can I say something?
And that's a big part of the problem.
We're just talking about Sydney, Australia, Perth, whatever. We are the tail of the beast. This is a huge international network, not unlike international communism that was trying to bring down democratic society through the 30s and 40s. And Julie Bishop put it very well in a very strongly worded speech, which Malcolm Turnbull should read in April this year, that it's a new and a virulent form, and it changes all the time. It's like a medical bug that is constantly re-engaging, and it's now working on very young people. And what it is very much like Bill Shorten said the other day, that what we've got in our midst are older people preying now on younger people.
Absolutely
They are preying on younger people, and they are like pedophiles prey on younger people. And as a Catholic, and I feel that the Muslim community have got to be much stronger on this. Whenever we have a disaster, the first thing they do is say, oh, everyone's picking on us. Well, we're not picking on you. Like a Catholic, I don't say everyone's picking on me.
When was the last time you went and spoke to the Muslim community and they said that to you?
Jackie, you've been deep breathing since we came on air. What would you like to say?
Look, I tell you, there's 600,000 youth unemployed around Australia, okay? Why aren't we bringing back National Service, a trade and apprenticeship scheme, okay? There's other countries that run it. Right, let's get productive. Instead of bitching at each other, let's find some answers here. That's one thing I'm putting on the table to Turnbull. Okay, we need to get these kids and we need to get them work. We need to reinstall their morals and grassroots and their values. I think the second question that we need to ask, and it needs to be asked, is that young boy, he was in a mosque 15 minutes beforehand, okay? We have no idea where that weapon's come from. We know he's been in that mosque and he showed up at that mosque many times before that. I want to know whether those people in that mosque, whether they're the imams or whether they're the preachers, have they been, have they been put through their paces, basically? Have they been interrogated? Because let's face it,
we do have to let authorities handle that, though,
point.
Jackie. But how does a 15-year-old get recruited?
That's what I want to know.
Well,
so we're going straight back to the mosque. I want to know what a 15-year-old boy...
It's not about the community. It's not just about
communities
and
families.
Julie
Bishop
that have been arrested. It is not just about the... Wait a moment, Anne, and let me have my say. It is not just about the communities and parents.
Off the internet.
It is not just about the communities and parents.
Hang on a second.
How do you know that? Did the police
It's not just about
and
the communities and parents in this situation.
It was done in Australia, not on the
can we need to allow whoever's talking at the moment, and that is you, just to let them speak for just a little while, and we can move on.
ISIS have an ability to use the internet, and what's happened in the last 10 years, that's the difference. Technology and communication are the difference, and it's exactly what you said at the start, Anne, in that we are interconnected now. So young people aren't just being influenced by the local imam or their parents or their communities. These messages are coming online. You can be in a hole in your bedroom, hiding out and being influenced by someone on the other side of the globe. The partners for the Australian government in this prevention space, and I'm not talking about the punishment space because that's different, but in the prevention space, is working with community leaders and working with families to say, how do we stop...
That's just empty rhetoric. What does that mean in practice, working? That's something politicians say, and I'll tell you what,
it
doesn't count for a row of crackers. It doesn't count for a can of beans. Working, what does that mean in practice?
What did Father Chris Riley say? Chris Riley has been working with abandoned teenagers,
Muslims has been working with the Muslims in Western Sydney. Hold on. Problem?
And
no, but with respect, he has been working with Muslims. He says there are push and pull factors for young Muslims.
Yes,
the push is racism, and the pull is extremism.
Absolutely.
And so they're nestled in between all of that. They're losing young Muslim men. Campbell, what do you think?
I think the Australian government have gone out of their way to try and not make this about religion, and they're treating us like fools. It clearly is religion. I heard Malcolm Turnbull, Julia Bishop say it's politically motivated. And I'm not sure about you, but if you're going down the street killing people, yelling out Allah Akbar, I don't see him running for the Prime Minister of this country.
Okay, Sandy Ray, from a psychological point of view, how do you stop young kids getting attracted to this?
Okay, Julie Bishop made a really important point, and she said families are the front line of defence.
Exactly.
When you find bad behaviour, when you find dysfunctional behaviour, when you find antisocial behaviour, the first port of call is to look what's going on in the family. There's two things that I don't think have been properly discussed. One is, first of all, the overarching question is, why are these young 15, 16-year-olds so vulnerable? Well, first of all, they are adolescents. What are the three functions of developmental psychology for adolescents? One is their sense of identity. They're discovering who they are, what they are, etc., etc. One is sexual identity. And the third is independence. As a result of that, we know developmentally, their developmental trajectory, their pathway, is to engage in risky behaviour, moodiness, disconnect from their family. So that's one part of the psychology of these children. Then the next part is there are certain individuals. So we know that violence is a manifestation of anger. So there are what's called intra-individual risk factors that sit within these adolescents. And this is well documented. It can be anger, it can be vengeful, it can be having a sense of isolation. We can have parental depression, poor parenting management techniques. Children do not behave in isolation of their families. So if we're going to write, for instance, a forensic report on this adolescent, my first port of call is what is going on in that micro world in the family. Then I look to the school, then we look to the community, then we look what other influences. And it's quite a structured process of understanding.
It's a bit late for the poor Cheng
family. Well, we're discussing it. We are discussing it.
I heard the Deputy Police Commissioner last night was stating that these Muslim youth, they're doing this in a way to rebel, that it's not religiously driven. Well, what I did to rebel was throw a house party when my parents went out and have a cigarette. I didn't go out there and murder an innocent person or join up with ISIS and try and behead people.
But the word and the order coming from ISIS is to go out and do these lone wolf killings. And the boy did use the internet, but he also was influenced by his companions. He got the gun from those who couldn't do it themselves because they were already under the investigation of the police. So they used him as a dupe. He was just like a paedophile acts on a young person. He was completely groomed. He was completely used as an instrument of their evil, and he killed the policeman.
This whole idea that they're groomed like pedophiles.
He was groomed.
They have agency. Whether you like it or not, this 15-year-old kid made choices. He had choices. And I've spoken to dozens of former terrorists, and they all tell me the same thing. They all take responsibility. They all say, I made a choice.
Okay,
on
well,
the
that's
internet,
the first step.
these young people are the ones who are reaching out to somebody, whether it's to
Correct.
help them travel or to help them get a gun or whatever it is they want to do.
But what are the mosques doing?
Well,
They're harbouring the radicals.
To ignore the fact that these young people have agency in this, then how do we treat it?
Well,
how
first
do
of all,
we deal
you
with
do
that?
this.
All
You
right,
know someone in
we
your
have to-
mosque
we do have to leave it there.
is
We want the
doing this, you
discussion to
report it to the
continue. No
police.
doubt it will continue in the
They
break.
do.
They turned on
don't.
the country that
They're
gave them
community
that
Okay, look,
reporting
refuge.
to the police.
Searching
Okay,
for
well,
no,
They don't report
It's
it.
no
They're
use
searching for an
everyone
identity.
talking
They
over
don't
each
report it
other.
to the police.
Anyway, that is how heated the debate is right across Australia, and that's why it's here on The Verdict. It's a complex but important discussion. Please thank Dr. Anne Alley for being with us tonight. Thank you, Doctor.
Sexual activity in our teenagers can be dangerous, no doubt about that. What are the dangers? Well, pregnancy, duh, of course. Don't avoid that. Sexually transmitted diseases, specifically chlamydia, which is very common, probably the most common viral sexually transmitted disease, and it can cause infertility. It's not a good disease. There's gonorrhea, herpes, syphilis, which is relatively uncommon, hepatitis C, HIV, a lot of these different germs that you just gotta avoid by avoiding sexual activity with multiple partners or sexual activity at all, and using condoms, of course, would be important. There's the emotional aspect of it. Our young people are very tender in their emotions, especially the young women, and as you know, men and young boys can sometimes take advantage of young women, and there's an emotional downside to this whole thing. So talk to your kids when they're young. It's not too early to start, even at the 11 to 12 to 13 year age, and talk to them about the dangers.